Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to Lux, and in today's video, we're going to be talking about Call of Duty World War II as a retrospective, looking back at the entire season, from start to finish, every single map in depth. But before we get started proper into those details, I'm going to start out with what I'm calling the timeline to how we got where we are today. And what I mean by this is how we ended up getting the influences and underpinnings that we got for Call of Duty World War II Zombies that has been called things along the lines of grungy, dark, all those sorts of types of adjectives by numerous different YouTubers and people along those lines as far as thematic sense is concerned. Now, join me on my journey as we start in the 1960s. In 1962, a very not so well known, I say with all the joking in the world, was created, a band, in 1962. And it was called the Rolling Stones. And the Rolling Stones would go on to formulate the ideas of anti-establishment and, going against the grain of what was popular at the time, and they became popular with their anti-establishment sort of mentalities and ideas. So much so that they would influence the rest of the music industry for decades upon decades to come. They are still active to this very day. And it all started in 1962 in England. And it all started in 1960. In 1975, the Rolling Stones would get outdone in their anti-authority and anti-establishment sort of mentalities and views by a band called the Sex Pistols. You may have heard of them. They had a very infamous accidental murder and, suicide by, Sid Vicious. And so much so that the iconic Gary Oldman has actually done a film called Sid and Nancy about, Sid Vicious and his late wife, Nancy Spungen. And the Sex Pistols would go to formulate the ideas of punk rock to be the sort of mentality of, we do whatever the hell we want, and screw you for trying to tell me what to do. The reason I bring all these differing examples up is because I want to give the context as to how we got these underground communities of anti-popularity, anti-establishment ideas that would later become the mainstream that people would look to and love all the time. Carrying on into our next particular example, we're going to go right into the 90s and latter 80s, of course. Right into the 90s and latter 80s. In 1989, a very, very small band known as Nirvana was starting to get its traction in the Pacific Northwest, specifically in the state of Washington. And in 1991, they would release an album called Nevermind, which would go on to change the entire music industry from the 80s glam metal and glam rock ideas that you would get from the Motley Crues and the, Guns N' Roses and those sorts of bands to a grittier, more genuine and raw feeling sort of music, and with distortion and heavy drums and all of those different aspects with their hit song Smells Like Teen Spirit. And this would change the entire music and in general pop culture for the rest of time. There aren't many people out there, as much as my sarcasm will have you to believe, that haven't heard of Nirvana and at least respect what Nirvana has done for the music industry and pop culture as a whole. The entire idea of flannels and grunge was not created by Nirvana, but really brought into the forefront by Nirvana, especially after the tragic death of Kurt Cobain in 1994, as well as the release of movies such as The Crow in 1994, and also within the 80s, I think even in 1989, the release of comics such as The Sandman, done by Neil Gaiman, which are amazing comics that I cannot recommend enough to you people out there who enjoy stories. Yes, it's DC technically, but this ain't like any other DC comic that you'll ever read, or even a Marvel comic out there. I just want to say that, and we'll move on to the next part of our timeline here. The 1990s were so influential in their music and their attitudes that it would go on to revolutionize not just the music industry, but as well as the entertainment industry as far as what we now refer to as professional wrestling is concerned as well. Because in the 90s, in the mid-90s, as we had the era of grunge music from the likes of Nirvana and other things such as that, we also had the emergence of what was known as Extreme Championship Wrestling, or ECW for short. And their attitudes utilized music such as Enter Sandman by Metallica for the entrance themes for some of their characters, such as Sandman. And the reason I bring this up is because that was a small promotion that later would become resurrected later in WWE's life cycle. But another mention to this is there are plenty of WWE executives or influential people that have gone on record saying if it wasn't for the likes of what happened with ECW, there wouldn't have been what we now know as the Attitude Era of WWF, or the World Wrestling Federation. They sued and then became the World Wrestling Entertainment, but I digress from that. And also the Monday Night Wars from WCW, Monday Night Nitro, and Monday Night Raw from the WWF/E. And that created a super company that literally is in the exact same field as entertainment as far as gaming is concerned. It's almost like the same sort of communities are within the same sort of aspects between gaming and professional wrestling. The reason I say this is because a lot of people back in the 90s really liked the fact that there were two different variations warring with each other. They could watch Nitro, or they could watch Raw, or they could watch both. They had options. Versus now we have the monopoly on professional wrestling, and the only real company that is worth watching is WWE, and they don't make very good content and listen to their fans. And that is where the zombies community, I think, is starting to head, is that the zombies community is harboring a community that jumps to this idea of monopolizing zombies to only be created by Treyarch. And this is proven to not work very well given how different things in the professional wrestling industry worked in the early 2000s, because of after the Attitude Era and the arrival of Stone Cold Steve Austin and The Rock and all those figures, WWE would later then pull ahead, buy out WCW, and then WCW would be no more. ECW would be relaunched in the early 2000s, and then that wouldn't work very well, and yeah. So professional wrestling is a kind of weird mirror to the zombies community, because we are slowly but surely pushing towards this monopoly on zombies. As much as we claim that it's going to be for the betterment of the zombies community, I'm not so sure about it. And I just wanted to bring that up, as well as this extra example of the influence of a lesser anti-authority sort of figure literally ending up becoming the mainstream thing that would later create a multi-billion-dollar corporation that runs an entire industry, and would create Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, the biggest guy in all of Hollywood, got his start from professional wrestling and the Attitude Era, which was inspired by ECW, which was inspired by grunge and punk music. that, and we'll move on to the next part of our timeline. Now we are going to take a decent jump in time, more than 10 years, and instead of it being about music this time, we're going to jump to film and games now. We're going to jump to the year 2008. In the year 2008, a very, very popular movie that so far hasn't seemingly been replicated, known as The Dark Knight, came out, and we all fell in love with the likes of Heath Ledger and Christian Bale's Batman and Joker, respectively, created by Christopher Nolan. Is a film that hasn't been really touched in comparison to the impact that it had on popular media. See, before this movie came out, most of the superhero movies we were used to getting were not very top tier sort of movies that we come to learn and expect now from the likes of Marvel and occasionally DC. And also within the same year, or maybe in 2007, I can't quite remember, the first Iron Man was also made, which again, in retrospect, in comparison to newer Marvel movies, isn't quite as good, but it is still actually very good indeed. To add to this, in 2008 was the release of Treyarch's Call of Duty World at War, and the introduction of the Call of Duty Zombies story, with the very first map, Nacht der Untoten, Verrückt, and then Shinonuma and Deriz. The story started formulating, technically speaking, in around about Verrückt, maybe Shinonuma, depending on who you ask. But in 2008, we had a very, 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 very important year. And the reason I bring these up in regards to Call of Duty World War II is because of the fact that World at War started out as a very grungy, underground, dark and dingy, no one really knew about it sort of thing. It was just a small group of people who found it after the World at War campaign, and they were telling their friends. I remember, and I said this recently on the Zom Squad podcast, which I will have a link to down below in the description. I was saying this recently, that back in the day, there wasn't really a big YouTube presence to do with anything to do with gaming at all, let alone Call of Duty Zombies, and you didn't really get spoilers on the fact that this mode existed or that the map was coming. You finished the World at War campaign, and you played it meaning zombies, and you were genuinely terrified and surprised by what you were seeing. It was scary, it was fun, and you couldn't stop loving it at the same time. And that was the crazy part about it, is that zombies started out as this underground community, and I feel that Call of Duty World War II is in a similar state at this point, because the story has just started and had its conclusion with the Frozen Dawn, and it is a cycle, and we'll get into that in our story video coming later this week, or somewhere between now and just before the release of Black Ops 4. But the problem that comes up, and that a lot of people don't necessarily realize, is that the early zombie storyline by Treyarch, anything before Transit, was pretty well the exact same sort of stuff done in World War II Zombies. And again, we're going to talk about this a lot more in the storyline video that's coming later, but they're very, very similar, and a lot of the aspects and the attitudes and the influences are all the same and came from the same spots and the same areas as listed previously in our timeline here. You know, the punk atmospheres and the grunge atmospheres created by things such as punk rock music starting all the way back in the 50s or 60s, all the way up to Nirvana in the 1990s, including now World at War Zombies, that would later, you know, be recreated numerous times over because of how actually really well it is, just in its simplicity, but still. And movies like The Dark Knight and Iron Man 1. They weren't happy-go-lucky movies or games or music. It wasn't stuff that, you know, you bang that out and you're feeling amazing afterward. It was stuff that you banged out because you could relate to it and you looked at it and it was grounded. It was something that could have been, or something that you felt a personal connection with. And that is why I think World War II Zombies is very, very underrated. Is because it has a lot of things that are based off of communities that were very underground and then suddenly became the mainstream things later on in their lives, especially after certain different things happened. And this is why I want to talk about why I love this game and why I actually like it over a lot of Treyarch Zombies. Anyone who's watched my channel for a while or listened to me talk or even seen me on my Twitter, my top favorite Zombies map is World at War Verrückt. The reason I love Verrückt is because it ticks off a lot of the boxes for me as far as things I liked. I grew up with stories like Batman and, you know, Lovecraft and stuff like that. So I grew up knowing about, you know, mental health issues and insane asylums and stuff, and the weird twisted things that humans could think up about possible things that could have or did happen or were believed by different people. And that's the crazy part that was originally captured in Verrückt, was a lot of it wasn't about the fact that there were zombies. It was more about what was happening, because you could always hear screams. So what was happening just outside of your view, all the little blood-stained, you know, pathways of dragged-out bodies, and all the weird things, what everyone calls the dentist chair, but I just think is a general torture chair, of like you're hearing the screams and the drilling and all these crazy, crazy things, and you're just like, yikes! I don't know what the hell to think about what happened here, and it's crazy. And that's what I think Call of Duty World War II Zombies did consistently well throughout the entirety of its season, was that it started off with the Final Reich, and this is now slowly transitioning into our reviews of maps. The Final Reich, we started off with these very, very, oh my god, what the hell is that when it came to these zombies. They looked gruesome. They looked like they had been resurrected, as opposed to just looking like a person with weird decaying sort of flesh and, you know, eye color change. These were zombies that were missing parts of their jaws. They had their back and their spine revealed, and their heads held in place, and clubs for arms instead, or their arms completely torn off so much that little, like, insects were crawling all over them, or that they were sewn together. That's just the Final Reich encompassing that. Then in The Darkest Shore, you get all of those things in spades, and then you get the Moishlas, which have enhanced intelligence as far as zombies are concerned, and they have their own possible cultures and ideas, and I loved World War II seasons for a lot of the things that a lot of people attacked it for. Maintaining its consistency and feeling like it was the next chapter in the same exact book. Consistency was great. People attacked World War II Zombies for having its consistency of feeling like every map was similar. But I said it previously in my Darkest Shore review, the list of bunkers out there made by the Nazis is quite extensive, and the list of those that were similar is all of them, because they were built by the same sort of people. They all look the same, they all act the same. And that is one of the things I loved about the early maps. In the latter maps, they went and tried to take that formula and said, okay, if you're going to pull that card on us, we're going to change up the formula entirely. And then we crucified them for that. I thought that while the Tortured Path was a very weird experiment, and I thought it was quite actually enjoyable, at the same time, it was very much a challenge, and at first I wasn't quite on board with it, because I was like, this is so hard, I can't figure it out. And there are certain gameplay features that we'll get into about why it was good or not good, but there's plenty of things that Sledgehammer Zombies team did much better than Treyarch, in my opinion, has ever done. And we're going to get into that, starting now with our reviews of the map. Starting out with the Final Reich. Let's get into it now. Now, starting with the Final Reich and Grossen House is very weird for me, if I'm honest, because I was very mixed, to say the least, about the Final Reich. Just because of the fact that I found it to be an odd sort of map in the sense that I and my friend Jedi, who I've had on the channel before in gameplays, we almost completed the casual Easter egg completely by accident. We didn't even know we were doing it until I later found out that we almost completed it by complete accident. It's very odd. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. I thought that Grossen House and the prologue and the Final Reich were great introductions to zombies as a whole, and I actually did a stream with my girlfriend, to which I will also link down in the description, of why we personally prefer World War II zombies, in the sense of we love the horror of it, and we like that it was a lot more new player friendly. It's a lot more fun and easy to pick up as opposed to Treyarch's newest installment pre-Black Ops 4, as in Black Ops 3. So we had that stream go on, and we both kind of sort of talked about our feeling about the differing maps as well, and we streamed Treyarch zombies and World War II zombies both, and it was very odd because one who has never really played zombies before in her life actually preferred World War II over Treyarch zombies, even though everyone in the community regards Treyarch zombies as the more better and well professionally done zombies mode. Now, the reason I was mixed about the Final Reich was because the Final Reich was a very, very odd map, in the sense that it was a combination of easy and difficult, because the easiness came in the sense that it was full of wide open areas and it was full of different tasks and things you could do, but it was very hard in the sense of there was a lot to do, and it's almost like if Origins was your first ever map. And I know I'm not the first person to compare the Final Reich to Origins. A lot of big zombies YouTubers actually started out the World War II season with comparing the Final Reich to Origins, which I don't know if that's necessarily a good thing or not to compare it to Origins, because Origins is a very complex map, and I'm still very, very torn on how I feel about that map. Part of me says it's fun and great because I get to actually always have something I can do, but then the other part of me says it's very large, and I don't like having to run halfway across the entire universe just to do this different thing over and over and over and over and over and over. We'll get to the things and gameplay like that done well or right. Now, as far as the Final Reich and Grossen House, I was very mixed at first, but you know, the Final Reich has really grown on me, and playing Grossen House is definitely like the good old days of playing Nocturne and Toten, and I thought it was definitely a great introduction, but I still wouldn't consider it one of my top maps, especially as far as World War II is concerned. But to be fair, as you could probably tell by the amounts of different gameplay and even the gameplay of this video, we're gonna get right into my favorite map to actually have a main quest that is doable, and currently I own the number 3 in the world spot for 4-player on this map without actually properly trying, which is pretty funny. But let's get into that map right now. Anyone who watches my channel or my Twitter or literally any form of anything to do with me knows I'm absolutely in love with the Darkest Shore, or DLC 1 from Call of Duty World War II Zombies. And I've stated numerous times as to the reason why I like this map and why it actually resonates so much with me. It's the ideas of why it's everything that we actually have realistically ever asked and wanted in zombies maps that involve fog. This is the weird thing that I found about the zombies community. We're saying that if we're going to get a map with fog, someone needs to do it right, and people propose numerous times, if there's going to be fog, maybe have the zombies lose you in the fog, and then this, that, and the other thing. And then Sledgehammer goes and does that, But because they're not Treyarch, everyone still crucifies the map because it wasn't Treyarch that did it. And that's the odd thing, is that Sledgehammer outdid Treyarch in this map. They did fog properly. Only one enemy can find you in the fog, unless you're shooting like an absolute madman, and that is just the Moishla. Yes, he does a lot of damage, but here's the thing. There's a video out there, and if I can find it, I'll link it in the description as well. If not, I'll maybe upload a video of my own one day, and I'll show you this. But you can, if you have this game's version of Stamina Up, you can outrun the Moishla the entirety of the time that he's out. Literally all the time. So, you know, he's really not that hard of a boss, honestly. And people complain constantly that the boss fight is uninteresting and the boss fight isn't very fun. I disagree. The Moishla's adapting to our specialist abilities and using them against us is perfect. And there was nothing to previously set up a big bad in this map. This map is so properly well self-contained. And yes, I see the constant YouTuber reaction of there isn't very much content on this map. I see that argument, and the argument is usually based on the fact that it's not a very large map, and it's based on the fact that, oh, I need to run this certain thing to actually kill the Moishla. There's numerous ways to kill the Moishla very fast, very efficiently. In most of my gameplays that people have ever seen, I run towards the Moishla, give him a big hug, and still wreck him, and I'm fine. I don't really understand, like, I understand where you're coming from with your argument, but I just think your argument is wrong if you're just saying that this map lacks content, and overall that this season lacks content, because realistically, if you wanted to make the content bad enough, you could. There's plenty of ways you can make this content, you just chose not to. Things like pistol-only challenges never got done in World War II Zombies. Melee-only challenges never got done on World War II Zombies. Even though in the Frozen Dawn, which we'll talk about later, it was literally basically encouraging you to do that. It gave you melee weapons, and no one has done a melee-only challenge that I've seen on YouTube at all, or Twitch, for this game. There's tons of ways that you could have changed up the formula in playing this game and map, but most of the content creators chose not to. Mostly due to the fact that they had some sort of personal, vendetta towards this game. They did not want it to be successful. And something that was talked about in a video I was watching recently, I'm not going to mention what video, I'm not going to link it, I'm not going to even talk about most of the stuff in that video, but this person was talking about another person pretending there was an extra step to the Final Reich Easter egg for views. Now, as far as doing it for views is concerned, yeah, that's scummy, and I definitely don't agree with that. But as far as doing it, if your reason was actually to try and drive the community to keep hunting and keep the interest going, part of me says I don't mind that, and the other part of me says I do mind that. The part of me that says I do mind that is just because of the fact that, well, don't bullshit me, I don't want to be searching for something that doesn't exist. Like Bus Route B. But something like that is in the intention of just trying to make it so that way it drives people to actually keep going, is not that bad in my book. Just because of the fact that then it more or less forces the decision onto people that are like, oh, this map has nothing left to solve. Every map, even in Treyarch, still has plenty of things to solve. Most of the people out there just refuse to do anything about it and don't want to actually make the content about it. People talk about how Origins is so great because of the fact that you can literally refine your run so well that every minuscule movement matters and you can get a better time by doing that. You can do that on every single map if you really wanted to. You just choose not to because you only want to praise Origins for it. You are biased to these maps, and I get it. Why? Especially if you're someone like Pat or Lex, because these maps are more or less your baby. But realistically, you could do that on every single other map that has an Easter egg and it has a quest. You just choose not to because it's not Origins. And whether or not you like to admit it or not is irrelevant to me, because that is specifically, it's provable, given that every other map has an Easter egg, and every other map you can do the exact same sort of things. A lot of maps require RNG, yes, but so does Origins. Every single map has the exact same potential if you actually try to give it that potential. I'm sorry if you disagree, but like, it's pretty proven true, obvious. I'm sorry. It just is. Okay? Now, that was a little bit of a weird tangent, but it's mostly because of the fact that everyone really undervalued The Darkest Shore, specifically because, quote-unquote, it didn't have much content or much to do on it. I completely disagree. I spent, I think the total number of streams I did was about 5 or 6 days in a row specifically, where I was trying to get the solo Easter egg even completed, and get, I think, again, number 3 it would have been if I actually had completed it at any time. If I would have completed it at all in solo, I think, and submitted it to Zombie Records, I think it would be number 3 spot. So, I'm not 100% certain on that, but in general, I spent almost a solid week trying to do that challenge alone, and day after day, I ended up messaging all sorts of different types of people, being like, "Hey, want to team up and do 2-player and try and get in the top 5 or so for this map?" And then I ended up getting number 3 in a team of 4 without trying, and it was absolutely amazing. And I, even to this day, will still load up World War II and play The Darkest Shore for like hours, because I genuinely, thoroughly enjoy it for reasons that I've stated numerous times. It clicks off a lot of boxes for me. Culty vibes, things that make me think, lots of hidden potential story stuff that I love. Now, we're going to carry on into the DLC 2, The Shadowed Throne. I'm not going to do a little cut for this because I'm on a roll here and I'm going to keep going. Now, The Shadowed Throne, I actually thoroughly enjoyed as soon as it came out. I really enjoyed watching people play it. I thought that The Shadowed Throne did a lot of right things in that everything looked really not clean, not refined, because of the fact that everything was just more or less technically just dropped in. It seems to fit, and it fits atmospherically and storyline-wise. And Cameron Dayton and his team had the balls to kill off, as far as we were concerned, the main antagonist in the second freaking DLC, or more or less the 3rd chapter. That's incredible! More storytellers need to do stuff like that. Please. It was so good. It was so fun. If I'm honest with you guys, I actually haven't completed a lot of the Easter eggs for these maps. Not because of the fact that I can't, or I won't, or I refuse to, but because of the fact that solo play is not very friendly, and I understand that, and that was a cognizant choice by them, and I completely support it, if I'm honest with you. But in general, it's not a solo player game, and I just don't have friends. That's one of the main reasons I haven't completed most of the Easter eggs, and I'm okay with that, honestly. I know how the Easter eggs go, I know the story, I know all that stuff, because I've been paying attention, and I wanted to pay attention. And that is how I feel about the entirety of this Zombies game. Was for the people that actually cared enough to try and pay attention and wanted to know, this was a great season and really was rewarding unless you were a content creator, because of the fact that big content creators such as Mr. T Lexify and Mr. Waffle Waffles incessantly beat the dead horse into the ground and continued to beat it until it didn't even look like a dead horse anymore, that in their opinion the game was bad. And because both of them have over 1 million subscribers, that makes it that way this community was constantly just like, the game is obviously bad. And differing sort of commentaries that they made, like my not knowing the storyline in The Tortured Path, made it so that way that storyline was obviously garbage, because if he doesn't know, then how is anyone else supposed to know? Well, Milo didn't put in the effort to care or really give a shit about the story, so of course he has no idea. Again, I do not hate people for this. I do not. The problem I do have is when you're making it so that way other people aren't allowed to enjoy what they want to enjoy just because you disagree. You can disagree, I have no issue with that, but if you're going to beat it into other people's heads and make it so that way it's like, stop having fun doing the things you're having fun with, that does annoy me. I'm sorry. But all in all, the Shadow Throne, I thought it was great, I thought it was ballsy, and also, we saw AI non-zombie characters and non-bad guy characters getting attacked, and we had that make sense. This is the biggest thing I want to praise World War II Zombies for, is they had everything make sense. Treyarch, nothing makes any sense. They had to use the multiverse after they've been making a game for only 10 years, but realistically they've only had 4 games, and they had to take the multiverse route. That is pretty fucking crazy in my opinion. And I've mentioned this very briefly before, but people don't like the fact that I don't like the Treyarch cycle, but then they call me a hypocrite because I like the World War II cycle. I'll get into why the World War II cycle was actually better and will open than the current Treyarch cycles very soon in the Frozen Dawn. All in all, Shadow Throne, I thought it was great. Atmosphere, again, nailed it perfectly. I thought this... Also, as a response to all the people saying it's just like GK, GK looks nothing like real-life Stalingrad has ever looked, except for that fountain area in the spawn, and the rest of it does not look like that at all, as far as Stalingrad is concerned. In the Shadow Throne, that looks like genuine Germany and Berlin, except a lot more on fire from the time period. Sorry, not sorry. Now, again, I'm not going to cut this because I'm on a roll. We're going to get into the Tortured Path. This was great. It mixed up the formula. There were many issues with it, like the fact that even to this day, you still can't play them in survival without having done the Easter egg, I believe. Again, I actually haven't honestly completed Altar of Blood yet, so I don't know if it's that you just have to have completed all the maps, not necessarily the main quest for the maps. I don't know. But in general, that's just how people are going to look at it, is that it's not available even if I haven't even touched those maps in the Tortured Path playlist. Yeah, that's a fair criticism, and I can't really fault you for that either way, if I'm honest with you. That is fair. Some of the rounds make no sense. I tweeted at Cameron Dayton not long after it came out, and I was stuck on channel because I was getting challenge rounds where, and the problem I have is that the challenge rounds are so unclear as to what, like, the objective is clear, it's unclear as to how much of the objective you have to do. Mainly the example I had and that I tweeted at him was, I had the challenge where it was like, kill as many Meistermoischlas as you can, or kill the Meistermoischla. I killed like 9 of them and still somehow failed the challenge, which was confusing for me. So, and as far as iOS has been reworked and retooled and fixed and changed as far as solo play is concerned, and in general, I've actually now passed Chapter 1 and 2. Chapter 2 I passed in my first go on live on stream. I actually thoroughly enjoyed it, and the only issue that really comes up for the overall season, and not just the overall season, but Chapter 2 as well, is that the season, allegedly, according to Zombros, was going to have an Egypt map for zombies, but that was canceled due to the fact that 9 was going to be coming out. Which is odd, but at the same time makes sense, and just in general I think was weird of a play. As long as it realistically didn't fuck up the storyline too much, it probably did. I don't know, I haven't asked Cameron about it. But, in general, that is something that is a genuine concern as well. Is that these maps are gonna get compared to Black Ops 4. Black Ops 4, I said it recently on the Zom Squad podcast, again, link in the description, that honestly, Black Ops 4 feels like it's gonna be the game to bring back the idea of Call of Duty being a big thing. But, anyway, all in all, I thought DLC 3 was a great idea for shaking up the system and being like, oh, you thought zombies could only be played like one way? Or, you know, a couple of ways based off of Black Ops 2? Nah, dog, we came up with ideas. Was it flawed? Absolutely. Is anything perfect, though? No. So, like, realistically, at least they had the balls to actually shake up the formula. And realistically, if you actually gave enough shit about doing anything to do with this game, you would unlock the thing that is the survival mode. But a lot of the people don't, so like, I can't really say that it makes too much of a real difference either way. It's just like, oh good, hand it to me, please. Anyway, now, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, again, I'm not cutting because I'm on a roll. Let's get in to DLC 4, The Frozen Dawn. It's actually just called Frozen Dawn, but I say The Frozen Dawn because it just makes more sense. And I actually honestly don't care about all the complaints about the fact that every map is the, and then word. I know there's specific words for what each type of word is, and I'm not an English major, but The Frozen Dawn, in my opinion, is another absolute banger of a map. I tweeted at Cameron Dayton after the reveal event of Black Ops 4. I think it might have been either after the community reveal event or after we got the Blood of the Dead opening cutscene trailer thing that we assume is the opening cutscene. Either way, I tweeted at Cameron Dayton around about one of those times, and I said, this is the time. The zombies community is bubbling. If you land something here that's going to be an absolute banger, the community will explode, and hopefully, God sent, would realize the potential that they're missing out on with this game. And then we got the Frozen Dawn, and then we got Lex being Lex about it. And we got Milo being Milo about it. And we got most of the creators being most of the creators about it. There were a few, like Noah and them, and I think even Milo ended up later doing stuff for the map. In general, where they're like, this isn't horrid, but they're still just been like, it's still not as good as Treyarch. The only complaint I have about it is, it isn't about the soul boxes, because realistically, you know, at the end of the day, making the puzzles and making all the things that involve all of the things for making a zombies map, it's difficult, and it's hard to come up with absolutely brand new ideas and actually make them work, because every time that Sledgehammer does something that innovates and changes up anything to do with anything, because of the fact they're not Treyarch, they're gonna get crucified anyways, and I've said this numerous times. They're damned if they do, damned if they don't, and I feel very, very, very bad for them because of this. And honestly, like, DLC 4 of World War II being the Frozen Dawn was great. The problem is that at the end of the day, all of their melee weapons are going to get compared to all the melee weapons in 9, and in general, their zombies mode is always going to get compared to Treyarch, and just because Treyarch did it first, and has been doing it technically for 10 years, Sledgehammer, even though I think they did a lot of things much better, they don't get a chance from either a large majority of the community or a very loud vocal minority of the community that just ends up making all the rest of the people just assume things. I'm more inclined to think it's the latter, if I'm honest with you. But anyway, Frozen Dawn. I loved all the lore, all the stuff. I'm not gonna get into why I love the lore and all that stuff in this video, because that is saved for my storyline video. That is going to be such a great video. I'm looking so forward to it, honestly. These videos could have came out earlier, but I'll be honest with you, I did get caught up playing Blackout. I enjoyed Blackout. for being Blackout. But at the same time, honestly, it's not because I think Black Ops 4 is better than World War II. It's not because I think World War II is dead. I just genuinely think that at this point, like, it's obvious that views for World War II are nowhere near being in existence, and for anybody, except for, like, apparently Greg FPS, which is odd. Not odd because of Greg FPS, but just odd because it's only for him specifically, and, like, he's like, yeah, my most viewed video right now is World War II video. I'm like, see, people, there's views. It's just rare. It's odd to think about. But anyway, Frozen Dawn, I loved it. I didn't necessarily like the fact that everything was a soul box or fine, but at the same time, I thought it was a great map all in all, and the only complaint I have about it is just the fact that timing-wise, it's just, and this isn't even just the Frozen Dawn, this is the whole season, is that realistically, timing-wise, you're gonna get compared to Treyarch so hard, and it's just not gonna help, and yeah. But here's a very good, also really big complaint, or not complaint, compliment that I want to give to the Frozen Dawn. As you'll see in the gameplay footage of the Frozen Dawn in the background here, I really enjoy the fact that you can fall off the map. It's great! I actually really enjoy that because of the fact that it's like, wow, it performs like real life. Things make sense. I honestly want to pound that into the ground of, like, into people's heads that I thoroughly enjoy World War II because it actually makes sense and isn't full of nonsensical garbage. But anyway, all in all, I thought the World War II season had some hiccups, like the fact that, you know, early release of the game, not helpful. People solving the Easter egg before anyone else touches it, also not helpful. The community's, you know, initial actual response to it, not helpful. Stumbling a little bit with certain aspects of the game, not helpful. But all in all, I think World War II Zombies is a much more palpable and strong zombies experience for me over a lot of Treyarch zombies. I have talked numerous times about why I like certain maps and what maps I do and don't like, and eventually I'm going to do either a top 10 or a top 5, or maybe just listing all the maps in order and what and how I feel about them. That'll be a nice long video as well. All in all, thank you so much to Cameron Dayton, Jason Warnke, and the rest of the Sledgehammer team. You know, all those guys, because realistically, at the end of the day, whether, you know, the rest of the community wants to admit it or not, I thoroughly enjoyed this game, and I will be playing it into the Black Ops 4 season, guaranteed. Because at the end of the day, I'm probably going to get just as bored of zombies from Treyarch as I will from anyone else. It's not because zombies is bad or boring, it's genuinely most of the time just because of the fact that there's only so many times you can play the same maps. And going into Black Ops 4, there's, like, I'm going to play Blood of the Dead only if I ever absolutely have to, or I feel like realistically getting a real sense of, like, hey, San Francisco, where you at? That kind of stuff. But, all in all, I've said that like 20 times, I'm so sorry. But, I love World War II zombies. Don't at me. I thought that the Frozen Dawn and the Darkest Shore were the strongest components, just because they were the strongest for lore, and the ones that made me go and think about things, and things that were like, ah, I grew up looking at this stuff. I love this. This is great. And again, I'm going to get into that all with all of my fanboying about that kind of stuff when I make a video. If Cameron and Jason, Warnke, not Blundell, if y'all are watching this, I hope my criticisms, however few they were, and my praises help you see that I love your guys' storytelling, I love your guys' gameplay, and I love what you did with the zombies formula, and I love the in my opinion, where your influences came from. And I think that you're genuinely going to be something that people are later going to figure out and see that they misjudged. I think it's going to be one of those things that people are eventually going to come back to, and they're going to see, like, you know what? This actually was really good. And it didn't deserve all the hate that I gave it back in the day. And as far as the rest of the community is concerned, I love you guys all. I just want to harbor real communication, real discussion in this community. Whether that's disagreeing and actually presenting your points and your perspectives and your views, or if it's just the genuinely theorizing about the same game. Like, if everyone ends up really enjoying Black Ops 4, which is highly likely, and y'all end up being like, it's much better than World War II, I'm going to be like, I disagree, unless I actually agree. And that's the thing. I'm sorry that I'm unapologetic about the fact that I have a different opinion from you guys out there. If I do, I'm sorry that bothers you. And I would love to have a genuine conversation with you. If you dislike World War II, I've had this numerous times with guys like Matt, who you've seen on the channel now, and Turbo and such. A lot of my friends, actually, that I talk to on the regular as far as this community is concerned, a lot of them were indifferent / didn't like World War II zombies. I have nothing against them, and we've had numerous conversations about it, and we've talked about why. That, I can't blame you for. If you have a good, genuine reason why you don't like something, and you bring it up to me, and I understand it, and I can't easily counter it because it just seems like a whole lot of biased stuff, then I won't sit there being mad at you. I'm not going to block you. I'm not going to be upset. I'm just going to like, but if you're just going to say, oh, this game is bad because it's not Treyarch, or it's bad because it's bad, I'm sorry, I'm going to counter-argue with you, and I'm going with you for a while to come. But at the end of the day, everything is an opinion. I'm just a guy on the internet. I do hope you enjoyed. If you did, please be sure to like. If you disagree, or even if you agree, leave a comment down below. Let me know what you think about it. Or head over to my Twitter. It's @LuxArchangel. And I'd be happy to answer any questions, talk to you, debate with you, converse with you, anything. Hit me up. I'm happy to talk. Anytime. Thank you so much for watching. This has been a long one, and I apologize. My videos are way too long nowadays. But I'll see you in the next one.